Hello and welcome to Historic Games and Such. Today we will be chatting about historical accuracies in the D&D classes by Wizards of the Coast, starting with the Barbarian classes. I have been a dungeon master for two large groups for a little over a year now. Each group met about once a week. This will be a video series going through each of the classes in 5th edition, one at a time, until we make our way through each of the classes. As always, these are just my opinions, and although I do perform research before each video, everything I say may not be perfectly accurate. We will be starting with Barbarians, but of course, if you enjoy the video, please click the like button and the subscribe button and comment down below to show your support. Getting right into it, the term barbarian originates from ancient Greek, meaning a foreigner whose first language is not ancient Greek, meaning that pretty much everyone today is technically a barbarian. It's those people over there whose language sounds like bar. This term was then adopted by the Romans and then made its way into English from there. The descriptions in the player's handbook describes barbarians as the protectors of tribal villages deep in dangerous wildernesses, and they quite obviously take their inspiration from Vikings and other Germanic, Gallic, or Nordic warriors. Looking at the artwork, this becomes even more apparent. Nothing terrible about the male figure. Pants, very barbarian, I like it. The woman, not great. First off, leather armor is not really a thing. I will discuss that in a later video. The axe looks cool, probably very heavy, but, barbarian, they're strong. And the woman is not the worst. D&D is very inclusive, which I absolutely love. Viking women had a lot more sovereignty than other places at the time, but it was still heavily suppressive of women. They were the only permitted religious leaders in most contexts. A random small mistake is actually the earrings. Vikings, which, to be fair, nowhere is it stated that this is a Viking, but let's be honest with ourselves. But anyway, Vikings, men or women, did not wear earrings. They believed earrings were for those non-cultured peoples. If we look at the starting equipment the barbarians get, you can have either a great axe or any martial weapon, 2 hand axes or any simple weapon, and 4 javelins. Of course, axes play a predominant role here, which is not inaccurate necessarily. Axes were extremely effective weapons for less experienced soldiers. A sword is almost always a better option for a highly trained soldier, which is very often seen in Viking culture, the epitome of that being the Ulfbert sword. Axes come into play with the less highly trained. They are easy to use in their simplest function of weight goes up, weight comes down, rendering armor rather pointless. Axes can be expertly wielded to maneuver around shields, armor, and other defensive measures. They are also, again, in their simplest function, very easy to make and are readily available to pretty much everybody. And they also have that dual purpose of, cutting wood. So the Barbarian class, having express recommended access to axes with the option to take any martial and simple weapon, is actually very accurate. Yay! Oh, and also, the standard 4 javelins that the Barbarian class receives is also very abundant in historical context. Javelin throwing was a very common sport, and javelins were used extensively in combat. Getting into the more details of the class, the main feature of the class is Rage, which is meh. Mechanically in the game, it is really cool and functions very well, giving resistance to all bludgeoning, piercing, and slashing, whether it is magical or not, which historically I don't think they were trying here, at least I hope that they weren't. The Barbarians also get unarmored defense, which Vikings in particular almost always wore armor in some way. whether it be chainmail, scale mail, or just padded hide, which in D&D's favor, they do have proficiency with light and medium armor, so they do still include that. But in reality, no one actually uses armor in the Barbarian class unless they get some crazy magical item. And so the unarmored defense is really what they're going for here. And that unarmored trope for the raging barbarian historically does come from many Celtic cultures in Germanic, Gaelic, or Gallic areas, wearing no or close to no armor or clothes. Cat, can you settle down? Wearing no or close to no armor or clothes not only makes the warrior fast and agile, but it also strikes fear into their armored opponents. Again, not being super careful to realism, D&D gives them many instinct abilities, which gives the class a more animalistic feel, which we'll get into later in the video, but it's whatever. And finally, we can get into the subclasses. First up of the primal paths in the player's handbook is the path of the Berserker. Berserker is actually quite rooted in history. The term coming from Old Norse bear, meaning either bear as in bare-chested or the animal bear, and Zerker, meaning coat, which comes together for someone who went into battle bare-chested as Snorri dictated, or bare-skin cloaked as is now commonly understood, and both of these were used to denote someone who fought with unyielding animalistic ferocity. So, well done, Wizards of the Coast. This one works very well with history. Then, we have the Path of the Totem Warrior, which is what my first D&D character was. Here, they have the wolf spirit, I assume coming from Ulfbert's sword, which Ulf meaning wolf, the eagle spirit, which they may have been done so more for the mechanics and to at higher levels grant access to a flying barbarian, and the bear spirit, which plays historically more with the berserker idea than anything. Some scholars have interpreted historical references of the term berserker and how they go into battle bare-skinned and with the ferocity of a true. Some scholars have interpreted. Cat! Hey! Some scholars have interpreted historical references of the term berserker and how they go into battle bare-skinned and with the ferocity of a true animal as meaning the mythology states berserkers could change their form into that of a real bear. The term for going berserk is to hamask, which translates to change form. The wolf version of berserker bear-cloaked is Ulfhethnar, wolf warrior, which has roots in many cultures from indigenous American tribes to Indo-European and also some Germanic tribes, such as the term that I'm using here. But instead of the eagle spirit, a better, more on-brand spirit could have been that of the boar spirit, which has very similar historical references and roots as the other two. Now we move on to Tasha's Cauldron of Everything, and I'm going to get this out of the way right away. Tasha's is a high magic book with very cool subclasses, which are easily some of the best overpowered subclasses in the game, which mechanically work awesome, but historical relativism is rather lacking. But remember, this is a high magic role-playing game, and nowhere did Wizards of the Coast say that D&D is or should be historically accurate. So with that out of the way, we're moving into the Path of the Beast subclass. Again, it fits with that Hamask aspect, or the literal changing of form into those of beasts and animals. So it's a fun subclass, nothing terrible, but a little repetitive in the historical context. And then we have Path of the Wild Magic. Historical context, nothing that I could find. But I absolutely adore this subclass, and I need to play it, or at least have a player bring it to one of my games. I would absolutely love that. Next, moving on to Xanathar's Guide to Everything, we have the Path of the Ancestral Guardian. This subclass emphasizes the spirit realm and tattoos. Ancestry is extremely significant in many cultures across the whole world. It is not necessarily at the forefront of Viking culture, but many of the other cultures the Barbarian class takes inspiration from, i.e. the indigenous cultures of America, are strongly rooted in ancestral guardianship. And tattooing is seen almost everywhere for most of history, and the Scandinavian cultures delved heavily into this practice, so seeing this in D&D is actually really cool. However, the tattooing in this subclass doesn't actually have any mechanical use, and is only mentioned in the description of the subclass, so that kind of stinks, but whatever. The other subclass in Xanathar's is the Path of the Zealot Barbarian. Zealot in modern context is a person or group that is uncompromising in accomplishing their religious or political ideologies, with negative connotations. Historically, Zealot denoted the Jewish resistance to Rome. The Barbarian class has the unyielding, raging, mindless tropes throughout many of the subclasses and the class itself, so the divinely raging Zealot, actually in the context of D&D, makes perfect sense. And historically, many religious zealots truly did throw themselves into combat with the thought of the divine will grant me strength and skill and luck. Common sayings are the most religious people in the world are soldiers and farmers. The two occupations where no matter how much work you put into them, you can better your chances, but your life and or your livelihood ultimately comes down to chance. My first and longest campaign I dungeon mastered for, we had a Zealot Barbarian, and when I first looked into the subclass, my mind immediately went to Alexander the Great, which I will definitely be making a video or videos about very soon. That guy was crazy, and Zealot Barbarian fits him perfectly. So all in all, religious rage, I call it accurate. Altogether, the Barbarian class is deeply rooted in historical context and is one of my favorites. This may be a more difficult concept to pull into some of the other classes, but I definitely have some good ideas for bards and druids, especially druids. If you like the video, subscribe, comment any thoughts you have, just keep it civil. Bye!